Alex had long dreamed of a solo journey across Africa. After years of preparation, he finally set off, his small car packed with essentials. Leaving a quaint town behind, he ventured onto a narrow, deserted road through the Sahara Desert. The mountains of dunes on either side felt like silent guardians as he drove, listening to the soothing strains of calm music. As dusk turned to night, he realized he needed to refuel. Spotting a lone petrol station, he pulled over, the only sign of life in the middle of nowhere. The station was eerily quiet. After filling up the tank and checking his car, he entered the store. Glancing back at his car, he noticed the stillness around him. Inside, the dim light flickered. Just as he took a step forward, a strange sensation crept over him. The cashier, an old man with piercing eyes, greeted him, "Welcome, traveler." Their conversation was brief but unsettling. The old man spoke cryptically of two shadows that followed travelers in these parts. Alex dismissed it as desert folklore, paid for his items, and left the store, feeling a mix of excitement and unease. In a moment of panic, Alex slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, and the world around him fell silent. The shadows halted their pursuit, hovering just at the edge of the darkness, watching. Gathering his courage, Alex stepped out of the car. The air was thick with tension, and the ground beneath his feet felt unstable, as if the desert itself was shifting. He could feel the weight of the shadows gaze on him, a cold, oppressive presence that seeped into his bones. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring into the darkness, but no revelation came, no ancient secrets were uncovered. The desert remained silent, indifferent to his presence. Realizing that there was nothing more to be found, Alex slowly returned to his car. The shadows remained at the edge of his vision, their forms flickering and shifting, but they made no move to follow him as he turned the car around. Unable to shake the sense of dread, Alex started the car and drove off into the night. But no matter how fast he drove, the shadows kept pace, flickering in and out of existence just beyond the reach of his headlights. They seemed to be toying with him, leading him deeper into the desert. The road ahead was barely visible, swallowed by the darkness. The further he went, the more the landscape around him began to change. The familiar dunes became jagged and twisted, and the stars above seemed to dim, as if something was siphoning the light from the sky. Alex's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as the shadows closed in, their forms growing more defined. They were no longer just formless entities, they began to take on vague humanoid shapes, dark figures that moved with an eerie grace. A loud knocking on his window jolted Alex awake. Heart pounding, he looked around, but there was nothing outside. The desert was silent, the only sound the wind brushing against the dunes. Confused and disoriented, he rolled down the window slightly and called out, but there was no response. Just as he was about to close the window, he caught a glimpse of something in the corner of his eye, two indistinct shadows flitting across the dunes. They moved with unnatural speed and fluidity, almost as if they were part of the desert itself. Alex's breath quickened. He had dismissed the old man's warning as a trick of the mind, but now he wasn't so sure. The shadows seemed to be watching him, circling his car, disappearing and reappearing at will. Driving through the night, Alex marveled at the Sahara's clear skies through his car's panoramic roof. The stars were so bright, they seemed to paint the heavens with light. He decided to pull over and take in the breathtaking view. Lying back in his travel chair, sipping his favorite drink, he felt a sudden prickling sensation on his skin. Turning around, he saw nothing. Yet, the feeling of being watched lingered. Moments later, it intensified. His eyes were drawn to a dune, a sense of foreboding washing over him. Trying to shake it off, he resumed his journey, but the feeling persisted, his head snapping towards the dunes, first left, then right, as if something was moving with him. Determined to stay calm, Alex focused on the road. Fatigue eventually set in, and he decided to rest for a couple of hours. He pulled over, laying back to sleep in his car. Alex drove back the way he came, the shadows still lingering in the distance. The road stretched out before him, endless and unknown. As dawn began to break, the first light of day slowly chased the shadows away, but the unease in Alex's mind lingered. The desert, with all its vastness and mystery, had shown him nothing but silence and shadows. The journey had not brought him the answers he sought, only more questions. Yet, as the sun rose and the familiar warmth returned to the landscape, Alex felt a strange sense of peace. The road ahead was still long, and his journey was far from over. Whatever the shadows were, they had left him with an experience that would haunt his thoughts for years to come. As he drove on, the desert slowly faded into the distance, leaving behind the shadows that had followed him in the night. The journey continued, the destination unknown, the end uncertain. And in the rearview mirror, just as the last dunes disappeared from sight, Alex thought he saw the shadows one last time, standing silently at the edge of the horizon.